In this video, we're talking dowels, so let's get started. All right, I've gotten a few questions over the months, years about where I get dowels, how I cut them, how do I process the dowels. So I get mine from the hardware store. Pretty much any hardware store will have dowels. I typically buy them in these 4-foot lengths. So this is kind of the most common and kind of easy to travel with size. But they do often have in the trim and molding section as well, dowels that are up to 8 feet long. So if for some reason you need something wider than 4 feet, that's an option as well. These ones come in a ton of different sizes. This is a 1-inch thick one. This is 3/8 of an inch. They come as small as I think 1/4 inch. And this is one that I use often, which is a 5/8 inch. And lately on my landscape weavings, I've been using 7/8 of an inch. I don't know why that measurement, I just had a few of them. And so I've been using them for that. I also have the other place you can sometimes find dowels and in smaller sizes is something like the craft store or the dollar store. So these ones are from a local dollar store. I'm missing the top bit here. I think these are from Dollarama, but they were just 12-inch ones and they're 3/8 inch thick. So that's an option as well. If you're ever at the dollar store, you can check there too. Typically for cutting my dowels, I use my miter saw. This is an expensive tool though. So if you're only going to be cutting dowels, you definitely don't need to go as far as using a miter saw. The other tool that I really like to use to cut my dowels is actually a coping saw. So this is a saw that's typically used to make intricate cuts on crown molding and things like that. But I find it's actually really great for cutting dowels. It has a very thin and fine blade, and it helps you get a more precise cut that isn't going to be super jagged as with sometimes a wood saw can give you. The other thing that's great about a coping saw is it's really small, so it's easy to store, and of course you can change the blade out as well. So if you ever break one or find that it's dulling, you can get a new one. Next up, we have sanding. So whenever you're sanding, I just want to put this out there, make sure you wear some kind of dust mask like this one. You can again find these pretty cheaply at the hardware store. So I like to use a 220 grit sanding sponge to sand my dowels. I just find they're a lot easier to work with and they last a pretty long time. And the reason I'm using 220 grit is that's kind of the highest grit you would want to use if you're going to be staining the dowel. And I find that it's rough enough that I can get everything smoothed out pretty quickly, but it's not so rough that it's going to leave the dowel feeling rough once I'm done. So you can see that the end that I cut is a little bit rough. And so I'll use my sanding sponge, but I also have this mouse sander, and that's what I actually like to use. I'm just trying to show you a more accessible way to do this, but I usually use my mouse sander for the ends of the dowel because it is faster to get the ends smooth. I find that sometimes the dowels have these little lines on them or they're a little bit rough, so that's why I like to just sand the whole surface to make sure it's all smooth and even. After sanding, we need to get the dust off of the dowel, so I like to use either my shop vac or I'll use my air compressor air blower thing and get the dust off, or you can use something really simple like a shop towel. These blue shop towels work good for this, and I'm just gonna wipe off all the dust so that I'm not getting dust everywhere. And also this helps it be prepped for staining. When it comes to staining dowels, I almost always use this one specific stain. Again, not sponsored or anything like that. I just really like this stain. You obviously can also paint your dowels with something simple like acrylic or latex paint. When you're staining, please make sure you read the directions on the can, but you want to work in a well-ventilated area, and it's a really good idea to be wearing a respirator. This is what a respirator looks like, and you want to make sure that the filters that come with your respirator are specifically for fumes. You can usually find these in the paint section of the hardware store, or of course, you can just stain outside, which is the most well-ventilated area you're gonna find. Before I start staining, I'm really gonna stir this up because it is really pigmented. You need to stir it because the pigment usually likes to sit in the bottom of the can. So that's what I'm doing here with just a little scrap dowel that I had, and I'm gonna really stir that and wipe it off after with a shop towel. So after that, I usually use a paper towel to stain my dowels, just because if I'm just staining one single dowel, I don't like to use an actual rag or something like that, because after you stain with a rag, it's garbage. So I'll wipe the stain on, making sure I really get it into the ends as well. You can let them sit for a while. Here you'll see me wipe it off right away, but you can let this sit for a few minutes before you wipe off the excess stain so that it'll penetrate a little bit more. But after that, I just wipe it off, and then I will prop up this dowel onto the little stain can to dry. Now, one tip I have when you are closing your stain can is to put some paper towel over top the whole lid before you start hammering, because sometimes what happens is you start hammering and the stain that's in the little groove of the top will just spray everywhere. I have done this many times before and gotten stain on things, and finally this is the way that I do it so that doesn't happen. I typically like to let this dowel dry for at least a couple of hours, and of course if you want to, you can clear coat your dowels, but I have never clear coated a dowel. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. I find that it's not super necessary because I always have the warp strings wrapped around the dowel, meaning there's a barrier between the wall that it'll be sitting against and the dowel. So I just don't usually spend the time to do it. But if you're concerned and you want to fully seal your dowel, you can of course finish it off with a clear coat. And that is basically all I do. When it comes to the size of the dowel that you want, I typically wait until I'm finished my weaving or I'm close to the top of my weaving before I cut my dowel, because usually a weaving is going to shrink in as you go just a little bit. As hard as you might try to stop that, it might shrink in a little bit. So that's why I like to cut my dowel once I'm close to being done weaving. The width of your dowel is a matter of personal preference, but typically I like to leave about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch on each side beyond the weaving. You can play around with that width if you want it wider or narrower, but that's what I usually do. Now, this is obviously a smaller piece, obviously, but another thing you can do is really pull out those dowels and look at them to find unique ones. So this one you can see had some really cool dark veining on it that I liked, and so sometimes I'll intentionally pick those ones that are more unique. But of course, if you want something that's more plain and even, then you can choose that as well. I like to really inspect each dowel before I grab it to purchase, because sometimes there's ones that have a lot of green on them. They might be really rough. They might even have like a flat spot on them. And even this one here, you can see has a lot of gray. So if you like that look, then you can grab those ones. But if you want something that is more light and even, you can pick through to hopefully find one like that. I hope this video is helpful, and if you have any other questions, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, check out this one next, and don't forget to subscribe.